Hello to everyone across the globe. Our guest is Nico Carpentier of Uppsala University. Welcome to our studio.
Thank you.
What about your research that you have prepared for ICRIA 2016?
Well, what I'm trying to focus on when I'm here is very much linked to a project I've been doing for several years on Cyprus. Because Cyprus is an incredibly interesting case study to look at the relationships between media and conflict. And what I'm doing particularly here at this conference is connect that research to rather important issues on refugees and on cultural trauma. So what we try to focus in the panel, because it's a panel that is organized by Uppsala University, what we try to focus on is the mediation of refugeedom. What does it mean to be a refugee? And we want to move away from a very Eurocentric approach. We want to look at what we can learn from the experiences of refugees, the stories, the narrations of refugees all over the world, and not just to focus on Europe. And what I'll be looking at is actually, in particular, what we can learn from the events that happened in 1974, when there were a lot of people in Cyprus displaced, together with in the 1960s, 63, 67. And what I'm interested in particular is to show how deep these traumas go and how long they last. And that, I think, is a major lesson to learn from these kind of experiences. Trauma doesn't disappear. It's actually being passed on to different generations, and it's part of the grain, the DNA of the country. It's so deeply embedded that it's extremely interesting, but extremely problematic and extremely tragic, all in once.
One of the topics that you are presenting is about the voice of academia. What is your opinion on this issue?
Well, I think it's a very tricky issue. I think we have a social responsibility as academics to communicate with and to the outside world. Well, that's obvious. I mean, everybody would say this, and the real question is how to do that, and how to do it in a way that is, I think, relevant to what we do, but also relevant to the world outside academia. And I think we can play different roles. We can play the role of the academic that communicates research to the outside world, and that's the issue of science communication. And I think that is important. But there's also the role of the intellectual, something that we've forgotten about. Academics can be intellectuals. We can play that role in society. And that's very different from being an academic. It invokes different patterns, different practices, different discourses. But we can play that role as well. And the third role we can play, I think, is the role of the activist. We can be committed to particular political causes. I think that is perfectly legitimate. And we do that in a number of cases, and we shy away from it in other cases. What I think really matters, if you look at these three roles, is that we find a balance. And that's a very individual question that each of us has to answer in his or her own way, that we find a balance. But whatever we do, whatever balance we find, whatever role we use, we have to be clear about the role, how we are communicating, and in what capacity we are communicating with an outside world. And that's a very difficult and very, I think, important and significant question to try to answer, at least.
Yeah. Thing which especially caught my eye is called, and forgive me for reading it, Analyzing the Participatory Creation of a World of Warcraft Modification. Why did you decide to focus on gaming industry, and could you tell us more about it?
It's a collaboration with one of my Uppsala colleagues, Patrick Prax, and he has been working on gaming, and I, of course, have a very long history in doing work on participation and looking at how particular groups in society can become more empowered. And of course, in the gaming industry, you have the gaming companies. They produce the game, right? And then you have, of course, on the other side, the players. They play the game. But it's actually a much more complicated relationship, and you have different power struggles between the very experienced gamers, sort of hardcore gamers, that also in some cases contribute to the interface itself, to the game itself by modifications, mods. And from my perspective, this is incredibly important to look at how players can actually at least try to regain some control over the game through playing, but also through software modifications. And of course, the companies respond to that in different ways. They're sometimes happy with it. They cherish this community of very interested gamers, which is of course also for financial reasons. But in some cases, they really have issues with them because they feel that then these gamers are trespassing, moving into the territory where the gaming industry should have full control. It's a very interesting power dynamics that we can see in this particular game, but actually in the relationship between gaming companies and gamers.
I understand. You teach at many universities. Which one of them is your favorite?
Well, of course, Charles University, obviously. What else could I say? No, but a more honest answer would be that each of these places, I mean, I have positions at Charles University, Free University of Brussels, and my main position is in Uppsala. Each of these universities gives me access to a particular region of Europe. Mm-hmm. And that's incredibly precious to me. And in the case of Charles University, we know that, well, there used to be a wall that divided Europe. And of course, the material wall has disappeared. But there's still a cultural wall. There is still a cultural divide. And being able to move across that divide to look at another region which is culturally different than the region I come from, the region I grew up, Western Europe, that's very precious. And the same actually applies to the Scandinavian region, the Nordic countries, with Sweden, where I'm now based, as the example.
Thank you very much for the interview. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more ICREA 2016 videos.